Today, I want to talk to you guys about an essay written by Seneca. And the essay is called On the Shortness of Life. Now, I've read this essay probably 4 to 5 times, and I just got done rereading it, and I wanted to make a video about it and go through all the points that I've highlighted, because I've highlighted a lot of stuff, and just touch on some of the very important lessons I believe Seneca tells us about in this essay. So without further ado, let's start. It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough, and it's been given to us in a generous measure for accomplishing the greatest things, if the whole of it is well invested. But when life is squandered through soft and careless living, and when it is spent on no worthwhile pursuit, death finally presses, and we realize that the life which we didn't notice passing has passed away. So it is, the life we are given isn't short, but we make it so. We're not ill provided, but we are wasteful of life. So right off the bat, Seneca argues essentially that life is not short. Life is only seemed to be short because of how people live it. And he touches on this more in this essay, but essentially he says, take a look at your life. How little of it is actually yours? Take a look at your day to day. How much of it is actually spent doing something that you want to do? And before you start calculating that, also think about where your mind is when you're doing these things. If you're doing something and you're thinking about, if you're like fearing the future, you're lamenting, dreading what you're about to do or what you did in the past, that is not your time. If you're giving your time to another and their pursuits, that is not your time. If you're going to a job, something you don't really want to do, that's not your time. If you're sleeping, sleep is necessary, but that's 8 hours right there every day, more or less, that you give to the ether. It's not really your time. So with 8 hours to sleep, 8 hours at work, you're left with 8 hours. And then how much of that is actually spent? You have your commuting, you're thinking about the future, you're planning out the future, you're dreading the past, you're talking to people about things that don't really matter. You're talking about, who won last night's football game, or, who you're going to play in fantasy. It's like just aimless, mindless things that take up your time. So it is not that life is short. It is that we waste so much of life fleeing from the present, the thing that all we have is the present. The past is certain, the present is brief, and the future is uncertain. Or the future is doubtful. Seneca says that later in this letter, in this essay. But we will continue. Many who have no consistent goal in life are thrown from one new design to another by a fickleness that is shifting, never settled, and ever dissatisfied with itself. If you don't have a North Star, if you don't wake up every morning with this is what I want to achieve from today, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I'm trying to become, you're just thrown about by every little thing. Someone asks you to do something, oh sure, it's better than just sitting here doing nothing, so you go and do that, and then you're dragged by their will. We need to have a North Star in life, something to direct every action to. And when you take an action, you should ask yourself, is this getting me closer to my North Star? Or is this making me maybe go further away or just in a different direction? You want to be getting closer. You want to have a constant goal, as Seneca says, in life. And that can be looked at as a North Star, is what people say nowadays. Vices assail and surround us on all sides, and they don't allow us to rise again and lift our eyes to the clear discriminant of truth, but they press down on them, keeping them lowered and fixed on mere desires. It's never possible for their victims to return to their true selves. If by chance they ever find some respite, they still roll restlessly, just like the deep sea, which still sways even after the wind has settled. They never find full relaxation from their desires. You think I'm talking only of those whose faults are admitted. Look at those who prosperity draws crowds. They are choked by their own goods. How many have found their wealth a burden? How many have found their wealth a burden? So many people believe once they're rich, they'll be happy. And I cannot confirm nor deny, but I think it's pretty clear that there's a lot of people who are rich who aren't happy. And to wait to live till you have money is a waste. It's truly a horrible waste of time, because there'll never be a moment, there'll never be a thing you achieve that gives you eternal happiness. There'll never be something you do that, every second the rest of your life you can look back on and say, at least I did that. That's not how humans work. Desire is always going, the goalposts always move, and if you obtain wealth, you're going to have anxiety on trying to keep the wealth, and you're also going to want more, because you won't be comparing yourself to the people you used to compare yourself to. You're going to compare yourself to the people who have more money than you. The wealth, to many, truly is a burden. You'll find no one willing to distribute his money, but to how many people each of us shares out of his life. Men are thrifty in guarding their private property, but as soon as it comes to wasting time, they are most extravagant with the one commodity of which it's respectable to be greedy. People, you ask someone for $10, just out of the blue, they would look at you like you're a madman. They'd ask you why, for what, why should I give it? You get questioned. Very few people would just give someone $10 randomly. But you could probably just go up to anyone, start talking, and you get 10 minutes of their time pretty easily. Or even ask them for 10 minutes of their time, and they'd be way more amped to give you 10 minutes of their time than 10 minutes or $10. And I never understood how people, view time, money, and how they spend their money. Once upon a time, I remember I told somebody, I didn't want to buy that. And they said, why? You clearly like it. You clearly want it. And I was like, yeah, but, it's $20. After taxes, that's like an hour of work. Like that was like an hour of work for me. I was like, it's not worth an hour of work. It's cool. I like it. But to me, that's not worth an hour of work. And they looked at me like I was crazy for commuting or computing money like that. But how else should you compute money? If I'm going to waste an hour of my life for a mere $20, why would I spend it without asking myself, is this worth an hour of my life? If someone offered this to me and said, go do this for an hour, would I say yes? If the answer is no, then you should not buy it. Just because you have saved up a lot and you have a good amount of money, That is not how you should squander your money. It's not worth it. Truly not worth it. That always stuck with me because I see how many people, for one, squander their time, but also squander their money as if they don't sacrifice all their time for money. And then they wonder why they have no money and no time. Because all they do is spend their time, they rent out their time for money, and they give their money to the most trivial things. The most trivial things. Calculate how much of your time has been taken up by a moneylender, how much by a mistress, how much by a patron, how much by a client, how much in arguing with your wife, in punishing your slaves, in running about the city of social duties. Add to the collections the illnesses that we've inflicted on ourselves, and also the time that we lay idle. You'll see that you've fewer years than you count. And basically, like, I'm 22, but with all the things he talks about there, it's like I could probably count on one hand how much time has truly been mine. When you truly, truly think about it. Truly think about it. And that's pretty crazy to think about. Look back and recall when you were ever sure of your purpose, how few days turned out as you intended, when you were ever at your own disposal, when your face showed its own expression, when your mind was free from disturbance, when your accomplishments you can claim in such a long life. What accomplishments can you claim in such a long life? How many have plundered your existence without your being aware of what you were losing? How much time has been lost to groundless anguish, foolish pleasure, greedy desire, the charms of society? How little is left to you from your own store of time? You'll come to realize that you're dying before your time. How much time do we give to groundless anguish, foolish pleasure, greedy desires, the charms of society? For me, that one's foolish pleasures. How much time do I give to foolish pleasures? Marcus Aurelius has a line, and it's, the things we want so, how trivial the things we want so passionately are. And that's one of my favorite lines in meditations, because the things we so passionately want truly are so trivial. You think, once I get this, I'll be happy. Once I do this, I'll be happy. But that's never how it works. The goalposts always move, and we always want more. We always want more after we get what we thought was going to be enough. So therefore, it is trivial. It's just a waste of time trying to get these stuff you think is going to make you happy. Foolish pleasures. You'll yearn for some pleasure, and you get the pleasure, and then how long does the pleasure last? 15, 30 seconds if you're lucky. And then, you're either in regret for pursuing the pleasure, or you're off to the next pleasure. And you're never truly just at peace in the present moment with yourself. Never. We never truly are. What, then, is the reason for this? Your sort live as if they were going to live forever. Your own human frailty never enters your head. You don't keep an eye on how much time has passed already. You waste time as if it comes from a source full to you waste time as if it comes from a source full to overflowing, when all the while that very day which is given over to someone or something may be your last. You're like ordinary mortals in fearing everything. You're like immortals in coveting everything. I've read different translations of this essay, and I like the different translation for that last part. It says, We act mortal in all that we fear and immortal in all that we desire. And this translation says, you're like ordinary mortals in fearing everything. You're like immortals in coveting everything. They both mean the same thing, but I like the other translation a little bit better. But how true is that? When it comes to desiring something, we act like we have forever. Like, oh, I'll make time. I'll get to that. I'll do that someday. When today might be your last. But we're so quick to remind ourselves, that could kill me if it's something we fear. We act immortal in all that we desire and mortal in all that we fear. You'll hear many say, after my 50th year, I'll retire to a life of leisure. My 60th year will bring release from all my duties. And what guarantee, may I ask, do you have that your life will last longer? Who will allow those arguments of yours to proceed according to plan? Are you not ashamed to keep yourself from the only remnant? Are you not ashamed to keep for yourself only the remnants of your existence, and to allocate to a philosophical thought only the portion of time which can be applied to any business? How late is it to begin living just when life must come to an end? What foolish obliviousness to our mortality to put off wise plans to our 50th and 60th year, and to want to begin life from a point that few have reached. So many want to begin life at a point that few have reached. And 50 to 60th year nowadays, it's still a long time. But back then, like the average life span was like 60 years. Someone would say, "Oh, I'll do it once I'm 60." Like that's the average lifespan. Like at least nowadays it's 80. So people are like, "Oh, I'll get 20 years." It's a little bit better, but it's still foolish. It's still foolish to prolong life to the worst years of your life. How sad. How sad. Then he talks about Augustus, I think the first emperor of Rome, I'm pretty sure. And he says how Augustus dreamt of leisure. You know, he dreamt of leisure constantly. The thought that one day he would live for himself, he says. Leisure seemed such a desirable thing that because he couldn't enjoy it in reality, he enjoyed the thought of it in advance. This person, Augustus, the month I was born is named after this man. He's a important man, some would say. Like the first ruler of Rome. And all he wanted was leisure. All he wanted was some quiet time to himself. And he realized he would never get it. So he realized he couldn't enjoy it in reality. He just had to enjoy the idea of it, the thought of it in advance. How sad. And then he says this is why Augustus prayed for leisure, and why he found relief from his labors in hoping for it and thinking of it. This was the prayers of a man who could grant the prayers of another man. We take leisure and we take downtime, true leisure, true downtime, for granted. The man who could grant the prayers of any man wanted something that all those men had. The truths of philosophy and of life are often paradoxical. And, we often don't know what we have till we don't have it. And leisure, I believe, is one of those things. And a man who never had leisure, it's all he wanted. And a man who had everything and could grant people everything would have wanted what they had. That's just another reason why there's no reason to ever envy anybody. Because everyone's going through something. Everyone's going through hardships. And, the saddest thing I believe is for, a scenario like this where a man envies another man who envies him. Both are gaining nothing. There's no pleasure in envy. but both are envying each other in what they have, both not knowing that they just need to be happy with who they are and what they have. Because in both situations, they'll desire and they'll want things that they don't have. That's why Marcus Aurelius reminds himself to remind himself of what he has and how badly he would want it if he didn't have it. Think about all the things you have. Personally, I got my arms, my legs, and these are things I would yearn for if I lost. But these are not things that I am grateful for daily. As I think of it, obviously I'm very grateful for it. But I can yearn for something without just being grateful for what I have. Loved ones, people who love me, things of that nature. This is one of my personal favorite lines in maybe any book ever. Half free, Cicero said of himself, but needless to say, the sage will never resort to such an abject term. He will never be half free, but will always enjoy complete and unalienated liberty, not subject to any constraints. He will be his own master and tower above all others. For what can there be above the man who rises above fortune? For what can be above the man who rises above fortune? Nothing. If you can rise above fate, above fortune, you are above all. And that's what the true Stoic sage is. A man who has rose above fortune, and a man who welcomes everything as happening as necessary and as happening as the only way it could happen. Marcus Aurelius also says to want what happens to happen, no greater harmony. And that's a man who's above fortune. A man who wants what happens to happen. A man who knows that his foresight is so limited. A man who knows the universe knows so much more than himself. A man who trusts in that universe to give him the best life, to give him the life that he may not even knew he wanted. Sometimes you don't get what you want, but you get what you need. And the man above fortune realizes that. And Marcus Aurelius, the man who said, to want what happens to happen, no greater harmony, he realized that as well. Those vices of yours will swallow up any number of lifetimes. To be sure, this span of time which good management prolongs, even though it naturally hurries on, must in your case escape you quickly, for you fail to seize it and hold it back. And you're not doing, and you do not, sorry, and you do nothing to delay that speediness of all things, but you allow it to pass as if it were something overabundant that we can get back again. Your vices swallow up so much time. Your self-indulgence, your desire, your vices, they swallow up so much of your time you don't even realize it. It's such a pity. In fact, among the worst cases I count also those who give their time to nothing but drink and lust, for these are the most shameful preoccupations of all. Other people, even in the semblance of glory that grips them is false, nevertheless go astray in respectable fashion. They can cite for me people who are greedy, those quick to anger, or people who busy themselves with unjust hatreds or wars, but all of them sin in a more manly fashion. It is those abandoned to the belly and lust who bear the stain of dishonor. Those abandoned to the belly and lust who bear the stain of dishonor. Seneca says these are the two greatest wastes of times. Gluttony and lust. Gluttony for drink, gluttony for food, and then lust. These are the two biggest wastes of times. And I think I have to agree with him because they're so self-indulgent. They're so pleasure for pleasure's sake. At least the man who, like he says, in a more manly fashion, the person who has greed, the person who has, maybe blind courage but goes to war for glory and honor. They're better uses of time than, giving into your belly, into lust for the sake of lust. To see then that the affairs, whether good or bad, allow them no time to draw breath. These people who are just so constantly go, 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 they have no time for leisure, no time to contemplate life, no time to think if what they're doing is right. They waste years in constant pursuit, and then they look back and say, whoa, 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 why have I been doing this? Don't be like that. Give yourself time for leisure. And we all make time for what we want to do. If you watch 2 hours of, TV every night, don't tell me you don't have time to go to the gym. Don't tell me you don't have time for leisure and contemplation. Don't tell me you don't have time for anything. 2 hours, that's so much time. You could really do anything with 2 hours. If, you spent every day for a year doing something for 2 hours, think about how many languages you could learn, how much weight you could lose, how much stronger you could become, how much wiser, how much better at so much things. And one of those, the most important, would be leisure, contemplation, thinking, knowing thyself, as Socrates preached so often. To sum up, everyone agrees that no one area of activity can be successfully pursued by someone who is preoccupied. Rhetoric cannot, nor can the liberal arts, since the distracted mind takes in nothing really deeply, but rejects everything that is, so to speak, pounded into it. The distracted mind takes on nothing deeply. Nothing. We must remember this. We would do very well to remember this. When you're distracted, your mind is taking neither the distraction in deeply or what you're doing in deeply. It's just a state of waste of time. Humans, we weren't meant to multitask. I was recently listening to this book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, I think's the name. And it talks about how you have system 1 and system 2. And system 2 is, I think he says, what's 17 times 24. And you think about it, and it takes, your pupils dilate, you start thinking, you try doing it in your head, you're thinking hard. You can't think about what 17 times 24 is and, lift, like bench press 225 pounds. Or, I guess that could be easy for you. Take a left turn in high traffic at, an intersection that's high traffic. The mind takes in nothing deeply when it's distracted. So when you're trying to solve 17 times 24 and you're also trying to take a left turn, you could not solve the problem and get in a car accident. You did nothing well. You didn't solve the problem and you didn't drive well. So the mind takes in nothing deeply, and that's a waste of time. The shortness of life just talks about how much time we waste, essentially. Learning how to live takes a whole lifetime, and you'll perhaps be more surprised that it takes a whole lifetime to learn how to die. Learning how to live is a worthy pursuit, and it should take up like all of your time. Learning how to live properly. This is what Socrates' goal was in, questioning and partaking in the Socratic dialogue. His goal was also to try to find someone wiser than him, because he believed there was someone wiser. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But that was also Socrates' goal. He said a couple times when people would get aggravated with him, he said, they'd say, Socrates, this is stupid. Like, stop questioning me. And he's like, how is debating how to live properly stupid? Like, what he said, Socrates would say, what is more important? than this, right here, right now, learning how to live properly? What can be more important? Socrates would say. Believe me, it's the mark of a great man and one rising above human weakness to allow no part of his time to be skimped off. The mark of a great man, one rising above human weakness to allow no part of his time to be skimped off. Yeah, enough said. For being a most careful guardian of his time, he found nothing worth exchanging it, and so that man had enough time. If you truly value time, don't just say you value time, but truly value time as the most important thing, you will have enough. You will have enough. You won't give it away to random people. You won't partake in random vices that waste time, that do no good, because Seneca talks about it later in this letter, but I'll talk about it now because it pertains. He talks about you know partaking in vice is like pouring water in a vessel that has no bottom. There are moments that just go and they just leave. You learn nothing, you gain nothing, and you don't even want to look back on them. Living a life that you don't ever want to look back on. You have nothing in the vessel. You have nothing in the cup, because you have nothing you've ever done that you can look back on with pride, appreciation, happiness, nothing. It all just went away because you regret it. Everyone sends his life racing headlong and suffers from a longing for the future and a loathing of the present. So many people long for the future. They long for retirement. They long for vacation. They long for the next sports game. They long for the next weekend. And they loathe the present moment, all they truly have. And they build up this habit of longing for the future. When the future comes, they get there, and then they're longing. They're not even in the present because they don't know how to live in the present. They're longing for the next moment. They're longing for the next experience. They're at the football game on Sunday, and they get there and like, oh, wouldn't this be great to do again? Wouldn't this be amazing to do next Sunday? Like, oh, we should all do this again. Like halfway through the game, and they're already thinking about doing it again. Live in the present. That's all you have to gain or lose. So there's no reason to believe that someone has lived long because he has gray hair and wrinkles. He's not lived long, but long existed. Wisdom does not come with old age. I think a lot of people think wisdom comes with old age. But I've met a lot of older people I wouldn't consider to be wise. It can be a byproduct of old age because you have so much experience, you've gone through so much life, you've seen so much things. If you're actually learning and actually absorbing life, you will gain wisdom from old age. But so many don't. So many don't learn from their mistakes. So many are stuck in their ways. So many, there's another line in one of these essays, and it's not from Seneca, but from the person he's writing to, or who's writing to Seneca. And he says, I believe many would have found wisdom if they did not believe they already possessed it. And I think that's the problem with a lot of people nowadays. They believe they already know everything. They believe all their opinions are facts, and they believe they don't have to rethink anything. And in doing so, they believe they're wise. And in doing so, wisdom eludes them because you cannot learn that which you think you already know. He didn't have a long voyage, but he was long tossed about. That goes back to the last guy. I guess I'll read the rest of it. For suppose you thought that a person had sailed far who'd been caught in a savage storm as soon as he left harbor, and after being carried in the direction and that was driven in circles over the same course by alterations of the winds raging from different quarters. He didn't have a long voyage, but he was long tossed about. It just goes back. You can be old but not wise, or you can be old but not live long. You could, like in that, the person's that voyage was gone for 20 years. Comes back, they're like, You must have seen so much. You must have done so much. Tell us what happened. And all he has to say is, I was just tossed around. I got stranded on an island for 19 years, and all my time at sea was just put in circles. I haven't traveled more than 100 miles from Rome. You know, just because someone's been gone long doesn't mean they've done something. People trifle with the most precious commodity of all, and it escapes their notice because it's an immaterial thing that doesn't appear to the eyes, and for the rest is valued very cheaply, or rather, it has particularly no value at all. Because you can't hold time in your hand. People who care about the external material world, they don't regard it as important because they can't hold it. They can't calculate it. They don't, it's metaphysical to them. It's not real, but it's the most precious thing. Without time, you have nothing. What if I lost all my time? All my money would mean nothing. All my possessions would mean nothing. My relationships, everything would mean nothing. Time is all we have that truly matters. Experience is all we have that truly matters. Materials can be taken from you, they can be stolen, but your time is always going to be yours. You can be, put in prison, but if Victor Franco says, sorry, I'm just going to sneeze, but I didn't. Victor Franco says the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And he found meaning at a Holocaust, at Auschwitz. So it's clear that time is what you make of it. The meaning of life is to give life meaning. People set very great store but no one values time. All use it more than lavishly, as if it costs nothing. But if mortal danger threatens them, you'll see the same people collapsing their doctor's knees. If they fear a capital charge, they'll see them ready to spend all they have to stay alive. People regard money as more important than time, but if death was staring them in the face and they had the option to give up all their money for some more time, they would do it. It is really insane that people value money more than time. When that's the truth. That if you had 10 minutes left to live and you were told you could have another year if you gave all your money, you would give all your money. And you live the rest of the year, probably better than you've ever lived. But that's why we need to be so careful with time, because we don't know how long we have left. We could have 10 minutes left to live, or we could have 10 years. We have to be careful in conserving an amount that may give out at any time. That's like what I just said, conserving your time that may give out at any time. You never know. You never know. Life will follow the path of which it began and will neither reserve nor halt its course. You may delay, but time will not. Time has never stopped. It's never sped up, it's never slowed down. Time has just been going steady. You've been preoccupied while life hurries on. Death looms all the while, and like it or not, you have to accommodate it. Death smiles. Death smiles at us all, and all we can do is smile back and remember that it's coming, and we need to live properly while we still can. The greatest waste of life lies in postponement. It robs us of each day. It turns and snatches away the present by promising the future. The greatest impediment to living is expensive spensity which relies on tomorrow and wastes today. We waste today relying on tomorrow. The greatest lie ever told is that I'll do it tomorrow. The greatest waste of life lies in postponement. You map out what is in fortune's hands, but let slip what's in your own. What are you aiming at? What's your goal? All that comes to lies in uncertainty. Live right now. Hear the cry of the greatest of poets who sings his solitary song as if it inspired with divine utterance. Each finest day of life for wretched mortals is ever the first to flee. Why are you holding back, he says. Why are you slow to action? If you don't seize the day, it slips away. Even when you seize it, it will slip away. And so you must complete with time, quickness, and the speed with which you use it. And you must drink swiftly, as if from a fast-moving torrent that will not always flow. Seize the day. Carpe diem. We have to seize the day. Live right now. That's all we ever have. And, obviously it's a very recurring thing in this. Seneca says over and over again, seize the day. Essentially, live in the moment, live in the present. That's all you have to gain. That's all you have to lose. This poet is speaking to you about the day, about this very day which is slipping away. Suddenly, unsuspecting, they've stumbled upon it without noticing that it was drawing near every day. Talking about death, obviously. The life of the preoccupied is very short. He says vices. So there's an old chairman, I guess, of the Senate, Fabianus, and he says that he was an actual philosopher, though, true philosopher, and he says he made it a habit of saying that we must battle against the passions with a vigorous attack, not with nicely or argument. The enemy line is to be turned by full frontal assault, not by tiny pinpricks. He has no regard for mere squabbling, for vices are to be crushed, not merely nipped at. Vices are to be crushed, not merely nipped at, because they waste so much time. It's like the Bhagavad Gita, the battle, the internal battle. Every day is a battle, and life is a war. And you got to win those internal battles, or you're going to lose the war. The present is brief, the future doubtful, the past certain. Preoccupied people lose this part, for they have no leisure to look back at the past, and even if they had it, there's no pleasure in recalling something regrettable. I talked about that earlier, how Seneca talks about how when you waste time in vice, you lose so much, because you lose the past because you don't want to look back on the past, and you lose the present because you're blinded by pleasure and lust and vices. Pardon me. Oh, splashed me in the eye. So the preoccupied are concerned with the present alone, and it is so fleeting that it cannot be grasped, and even the little moment is stolen away from them because they're pulled in many different directions. The preoccupied is pulled in many different directions, truly never living the present moment. Even the leisure of some people is preoccupied in their country retreat or on their couch in the midst of their solitude, and even though they withdrawn from everything, they are troubling company for themselves. To be troubling company for yourself is truly a pity. Seneca, I believe, says, the sign that you're becoming a better philosopher is that you're becoming a better friend to yourself. And then he talks about how people care about, their looks more than so many things, and says how angry they get if the barber has been a little too careless, as if he were cutting a real man's hair. And then I wrote next to that, I should get a buzz cut. That was a while ago, though. I should get a buzz cut, though. But yeah, it's like, he continues. He says, how they flare up if anything is wrongly cut on their precious mane, if hair lies out of place, or if it is everything doesn't fall back into the proper ringlets. Which of these people would rather have their country thrown into disarray than their hair? Who isn't more concerned about keeping his head neat rather than safe? Who wouldn't rather be well groomed than well respected? You call leisure these people who keep busy between the comb and the mirror. He'd say the person's preoccupied. They have no true leisure. They have no true freedom. Someone who cares about their hair, more than the well-being of the world. Someone who spends hours, doing their hair, doing their makeup. Waste of time. Waste of time. And to be clear, I spend zero time doing my hair. I take a shower. Obviously, I use soap, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. But I don't brush my hair. I don't do anything. So I may have long hair, but I don't tend to it, which I can take some pride in, I guess. Even though I'm sure Seneca would tell me to get a buzz cut. There isn't leisure. Theirs isn't leisure, but idle occupation. The people who, it's so evident nowadays with like social media. Someone has a chance for leisure, but they're just running to their phone. They're running to TikTok, Instagram, just running to something to amuse their mind. This is not true leisure. This is not true leisure. It's just occupation, idle occupation. They're not doing anything, but they're not contemplating how to live a better life, wisdom, virtue, things that actually matter, how to live properly. They're, dulling their senses and just getting pleasure from random things. People whose pleasures put them to considerable work are not at leisure. And now, of all people, they alone who give their time to philosophy are at leisure. They alone really live. There's so much to learn about oneself, about wisdom, virtue, life, and philosophy is how you learn these things. And the ones at leisure not contemplating these things, they're slaves to their own pleasures, their own desires, fill in the blank. They're not truly free. They're not truly at leisure. Then he talks about how, we have so many, the most valuable lessons can be in, this book is like $20, $30. The most valuable lessons can be in a book like this, in books like these, and the people of old. He says we can debate with Socrates, entertain debates with Carneades, be at peace with Epicurus, overcome human nature with the Stoics, and go beyond it with the Cynics. Since nature allows us shared passions of any age, why not turn from this short, fleeting passage of time and give ourselves over completely to the path, with measureless and eternal and shared with our betters? Not to read people like Seneca, people like Marcus Aurelius, people like Socrates, Confucius, Meister Eckhart, not Marcus, Epictetus, Heraclitus, Diogenes, Friedrich Nietzsche, Plato, Xenophon, Musonius Rufus. People, to not read people like that, you're doing yourself a great disservice. There's lessons worth millions of dollars that people never learn their whole lives in, these $10, $20 books. And to spend your leisure, just giving into pleasure for pleasure's sake, doing mindless, aimless things when you could potentially be learning wise, useful lessons from the greats is truly a pity. Truly a pity. So none of these philosophers will force you to die, but all will teach you how. And if you recall earlier, Seneca said, it's to learn how to live takes a lifetime, but to learn how to die takes even longer. Learning how to live and learning how to die from these people. Valuable lessons. What is more important than how you live? What happiness, what a fine old age lies in store for the person who puts himself under the patronage of these people. He'll have friends who advise him, who advice he can seek on the greatest or least important matters, whom he can consult daily about himself, for whom he can hear the truth without insult and receive praise without fawning, and who will provide a model after which to fashion himself. Learning about these people and reading these people, you can come to admire them, and you can come to learn how you can admire yourself. Because if you admire somebody, that means the actions, the virtues, the things they do are what you admire about people, or what you admire. And if you imitate them, don't be like, be yourself, but imitate some of the things that you find most virtuous in other people, that you love about others, and you will come to love yourself. That's how you become someone you admire. But for those who forget the past, disregard the present, and fear for the future, life is very brief and very terrible. Forget the past, it's because you want to. You don't want to remember the vices you gave into, all the wrongs you put people through, and all the bad things you did. And if you disregard the present and fearing for a future that isn't even certain, doubtful actually, life is very brief and very terrible for you. This is what I'm talking about. This powerful lessons in this book, and it only cost me $30. Think about how you've spent $30 this last month. You might have spent hundreds of dollars on drinks, at Starbucks, when you could have spent 30 and gotten this, a handbook on how to live well, on how to prolong your life, on how to stop making life feel so short. But the time of actual enjoyment is short and fleeting, and made far shorter by their own fault, for they desert one pleasure for another and cannot persist steadily in any desire. Their days aren't long but hateful, yet, on the other hand, how short seems the night that they spend cavorting with prostitutes or drinking. We just waste so much time in search for pleasure, fleeting pleasure, not true deep pleasure. It's paradoxical often, like I say, with philosophy, but true pleasure comes from the avoidance of pleasure. Avoiding short-term discomfort welcomes long-term discomfort, and welcoming short-term discomfort welcomes long-term comfort. That's why I think in today, discipline has never been in such high demand, because life has never been easier. And giving into all these brief moments of pleasure and fleeting pleasures is just a recipe to have a short life. It's a recipe to regret lots of the things you do, and to never understand true deep pleasure. Pleasure is paradoxical. True deep pleasure comes from disdaining, disregarding, rejecting shallow short-term pleasure. They lose the day in looking forward to the night in fear of the dawn. You lose the day because you're looking forward to going out tonight. And then you lose the night because you're fearing the dawn. You're fearing the night ending. You're fearing whatever. You're never truly present. You're either longing or you're fearing. Pitiful existence. How long will this last? Is it this feeling that caused kings to weep over their own power? The extent of their prosperity gave them no pleasure, but the prospect of eventual end terrified them. And then he talks about how the Persian king could not count his army. He had to only count it by size, saying it's 100 feet long and a mile deep. That's all he could do to count his army. And he wept because he feared, he said in 100 years all these men will be dead. But it didn't take more than 10 years. I'm actually making that up, but it didn't take 100 years. It took less time than that for him, the person weeping, to cause the death of all these men from war and disease and all this stuff. He caused the death of the man that he feared because time would cause the death, but the time never came. All the greatest blessings cause anxiety. If you think, once I get this, I'll be happy. One big reason you won't be happy is because you're going to be anxious of losing it. You're going to say, oh, I can't lose this. I'm going to be unhappy again. And in that anxiety, you're not happy. Everything that comes our way by chance is unsteady. The higher our fortune rises, the more susceptible they are to falling. Life will be driven on through one preoccupation after another. We shall always pray for leisure, but never attain it. Consider how many waves you've endured, and on the one side, how many storms you've weathered, in private and on the other, how many you've brought on yourself in your public career. Put to the test what it can achieve, leisure. Take some of your time for yourself as well. As all these are letters to someone. So now he's telling this person, take some time for yourself. Achieve leisure. You'll find tasks to busy yourself about in serene seclusion that are more important than any you've dealt with so energetically thus far. But slow-moving pack animals are far better suited to carry heavy loads than thoroughbred horses. Knowing about these distance, knowing about the disease has caused many to die. Retire to those pursuits that are calmer, safer, and more important. They're so much more important than social status, wealth, all these things. Retire to those pursuits. Retire to leisure, contemplation, deep wisdom, and share it. It's also what he says. I skipped over that part, but he talks about it. How learning from the dead, the greatest pleasures are teaching others. Helping others. Obtain the lessons that you have obtaining through wisdom. And that's a big reason why I post these videos. Just trying to help people see the things that I've come to see recently, and showing people, things like this book, this amazing book that has so many amazing essays, and it's cheap compared to how much we spend on other trivial things. So do yourself a favor and get this book and read the essay for yourself. I skipped over a lot, but I think I hit a lot of the good main points. And thank you for your time.